Hi everyone, Ada here, and today I'm gonna talk about this PC right here. So Cooler Master reached out to me and they asked if I would like to check out their new Cooler Master HAF 700 case right here, as well as their RGB Mobius fans. And the best way to do that, and actually the most fun way to do that, is to just build a PC and see how the case performs and then what difference these fans will make to your system. And this is actually a pretty high-powered rig, so it has an AMD Ryzen 9 7900X processor and a pretty chunky RTX 3090. So let's see what happened. Let's go. So I'm gonna start with the default build and how it performed before adding these extra fans. And I really wanted to use the new AMD Ryzen 9 7900X processor because it is pretty power hungry when stressed, and that is exactly what we need here. So for the motherboard, I went with the ROG Strix X670E Gaming. It is a pretty standard ATX board, but as you will see later on, it will look tiny in this large tower case. For the cooler, I'm using the PL360 FLUX from Cooler Master that has a large 360mm radiator and 320mm RGB fans. Now this will be more than enough to keep your CPU nice and cool, and even though it is for the AM4 socket, it fits this AM5 socket perfectly. I have 32GB of Corsair Dominator Platinum memory that is compatible with these new AMD CPUs. And for the GPU, I really wanted to go with the new oversized RTX 4090 cards that would fit perfectly in a huge case like this one, but unfortunately their performance is still under NDA, so I had to settle for this RTX 3090 Suprim from MSI. To power the whole system up, I have the XG850 Plus Platinum power supply from Cooler Master that also has RGB, and it has this very neat looking screen on the side, but unfortunately you won't be able to see it in this case. And speaking of the case, this is the Cooler Master HAF 700. It is pretty much a more affordable version of the HAF 700 Evo that I reviewed a few months back. So it doesn't have some extra fancy features like those RGB strips and the little screen on the front panel, but underneath it, it is still the exact same high-quality chassis with a ton of core features and a ton of installation options that makes it easy to put together any system you have in mind. But let's take a look at a couple of results with the system like this. I ran both Cyberpunk and a CPU benchmark at the same time to really stress the system as much as possible. Now this is quite extreme and this is not something you would really do with your PC, but a high-end build like this one should be able to handle it just easily. The CPU ended up at 86 degrees Celsius. Now, I know that a lot of people think that the Ryzen 9s will just hit 95 degrees right away, but with a big all-in-one cooler like this one, a 7900X will not go higher than this. The GPU cores ran at comfortable 73 degrees, but the hotspot was a bit high for my taste, standing at 97 degrees, even though that is quite typical for this card. The internal air temperature averaged at 39 degrees Celsius, and I measured a noise level of 43 decibels. Now obviously these numbers are completely fine, and a build like this one in a case that is airflow focused and already comes with a couple of fans usually doesn't need anything else, but that also doesn't mean that you cannot make it cooler, and it certainly doesn't mean that you cannot make it quieter. So I decided to add 11 of these Mobius fans. Now these Mobius fans are actually their new high-end models that should offer a very good performance at very low noise levels, and you can get simple ones that are just black for those non-RGB blackout builds, or you can get addressable RGB ones like I'm using today. So you can crank them up to 2400 RPM if you want to, but what I personally find more interesting is that you can actually tune them down to as low as 100 RPM, making them a great option for those extremely quiet systems. So I will be replacing the fans on the cooler. I will be adding 3 fans on the side of the motherboard, which probably doesn't make sense from an airflow perspective, but it will definitely look pretty cool. I will be adding 3 fans on the bottom of the case for some more intake, and then I will be putting 2 fans in the back of the case. And this is how it looks now. Keep in mind that for this many fans, you will need to grab a few fan splitters or at least some extension cables, because even though this case has a fan controller and an RGB controller, you might struggle to reach it, so make sure that you have some ready. And at full whack, with 11 fans added and the two 200mm fans in the front, the temps were actually quite impressive. So the CPU was at 71 degrees Celsius, the GPU went down to 66 degrees with a hotspot of 85 degrees, and the case air temperature was at 32 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, even though it wasn't as loud as I thought it would be, it was still pretty loud. So I measured 52 decibels at 50 centimeters distance. So you will have enough room to overclock your CPU and your GPU if you prefer to, and if you don't mind the noise. But with the fan speed down to 800 RPM, I actually couldn't measure any noise over ambient coming from the fans themselves. Igor from Igor's lab actually tested these fans in a dedicated chamber, and his results showed that these Mobius fans were beating the Corsair AF 120s by about 6 decibels at a similar fan speed, and that is actually a big difference. So with all 11 Mobius fans now down to 800 RPM, the CPU averaged at 84 degrees Celsius, the GPU temps were at 69 degrees Celsius, with the hotspot going to a higher but still very comfortable 90 degrees Celsius. The case air temperature was now 36 degrees Celsius, and most importantly, noise went down to just over 37 decibels, with most of the noise now actually coming from the GPU fans and the power supply, which was being pushed very much by the Ryzen 9 and the overclock 3090 being fully loaded. Now, obviously, it is a bit overkill to have this many fans, but it also kind of shows that you can just adjust your system to your liking if you add a few more here and there. And that is whether you like your system to be like super cool but a bit noisy, or whether you like your system to be super quiet while still keeping your components at very decent temperature levels. Now, that's it for today. I think that is where I will leave it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Huge thanks to Cooler Master for sponsoring it, because I really had fun making it. And if you liked it too, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to never miss my future uploads. Bye y'all, and see you in the next one. Bye.